John Chapman, Johnny Appleseed, was a real 19th century nurseryman, born 1774, died 1845, who planted apple orchards in the American frontier. He is often portrayed in folklore as a ragged, barefoot wanderer with a tin pot on his head scattering seeds at random. In reality, Chapman ran a shrewd planting business. He cleared fenced nurseries, planted apple seeds, and later sold or gave young trees to settlers. He did often go shoeless and wore simple clothes, even a coffee sack cape. But the famous imagery, a pot hat, perpetual flower child, speaking with bears, was largely exaggerated by later stories. For example, contemporary ledgers show he bought whiskey, pork, and even gunpowder, contradicting the myth of a strict teetotaler or pacifist. Likewise, although later accounts cast him as a lifelong vegetarian, food and store records indicate he ate meat and drank. He adopted vegetarianism only in later years. Chapman did favor planting from seed, no grafting, for religious reasons, so most of his apples were small and sour, used for hard cider, not table fruit. In short, Chapman was an eclectic frontier nurseryman, pious and kind but also practical and profit-minded, and many cherished folklore traits, talking to animals, never owning a weapon, miraculous gestures, grew up around his story long after his death. The Johnny Appleseed legend developed decades after Chapman's death, 1845. The first major published tale appeared in Harper's Magazine in 1871, when W. D. Haley cast Appleseed as a saintly pioneer embodying rural values. In this post-Civil War era, mythmakers like Rosella Rice, who met Chapman as a child, and poet Lydia Maria Child, 1881, embellished him into a gentle nature hero who wouldn't hurt a snake or an Indian. By the early 20th century, such stories were cemented by local monuments and textbooks. For example, a 1900 Ohio monument calls Chapman, best known as Johnny Appleseed, pioneer, apple nurseryman of Richland County. Yet even then, ceremonies openly mixed facts and folklore. Over the 20th century, Chapman's image was recycled to serve different cultural themes. In the 1930s, he became a populist icon. In the 1950s, a wholesome Cold War hero. And in the 1960s-70s, a proto-hippie, environmentalist symbol. Walt Disney's 1948 cartoon Melody Time, uncredited in sources, popularized the image of a jolly, bird-tending Johnny in children's culture. By the 1980s, he was recast as a clever entrepreneur, planting America's first franchise. In recent decades, scholars and artists have re-examined Chapman. Histories and graphic novels like W. Kerrigan's Cultural History and Paul Boole's 2019 comic detail his true biography and Swedenborgian faith alongside the myths. Thus, the legend evolved continuously, from 19th century tall tales and songs, through mid-century popular culture, to 21st century scholarship that distinguishes fact from fiction. Chapman's story is told differently in various regions of the U.S. In Pennsylvania, especially western PA, the legend is tempered by local history. Historical markers note his work supplying apple trees to frontier farms. Ohio highlights his role as a practical apple nurseryman. For example, the Ohio History Connection explains that, rather than scatter seeds, he created nurseries by clearing and building fences, then sold or gave trees to settlers as land opened. A 1900 Mansfield monument celebrates him as an unselfish benefactor to pioneers. Indiana likewise claims him. Although born in Massachusetts, he spent his last years there. Indiana maintains a Johnny Appleseed Memorial Park in Fort Wayne and hosts an annual festival, framing Chapman as a Hoosier legend and emphasizing his methodical nurseries on the frontier. In Appalachia, historians note that he spread apple orchards into Kentucky and other interior lands, and local lore remembers him as a Christian missionary who ministered to settlers as he planted orchards. Cultural groups also adapt the tale. Popular folklore, in schoolbooks, songs, and films, tends to stress his kindness and harmony with nature, often omitting his Swedenborgian proselytizing or business savvy. Religious communities, like the Church of the New Jerusalem, instead celebrate Chapman as an early missionary and strict vegetarian, reflecting his spiritual convictions. Conservationist writers highlight his tree planting as visionary stewardship of the land. Thus, depending on region and perspective, Johnny Appleseed appears alternately as a frontier entrepreneur, a humble planter, a nature saint, or a faith-driven missionary, each version blending fact and local emphasis. Johnny Appleseed has become an enduring cultural icon in U.S. identity and education. He appears in poems, books, and cartoons that recast him for new generations. Lydia M. Child's 1881 poem made him a gentle character. Countless children's stories and songs followed, keeping his image alive. Schools often teach about Appleseed as a folk hero, sometimes emphasizing environmental lessons, tree planting, caring for animals, or moral values, generosity, piety. In literature and media, he shows up as a symbol of American roots. For instance, he is referenced in gardening lore and even children's literature, e.g. Rosie Clooney's Apple Tree, Johnny Appleseed song. Public commemorations also abound. Many states honor Chapman's birthday, September 26th, with local Johnny Appleseed Day activities. Monuments and museums mark his legacy. Ohio has the Johnny Appleseed Museum in Urbana, and historical markers. Fort Wayne, IN, has a bronze statue, an annual Johnny Appleseed Festival, and Pennsylvania has roadside markers telling his story. He even appeared on a U.S. postage stamp, 1966, and was once considered for a commemorative quarter design. Cultural tributes depict him as the patron saint of American horticulture. In short, Chapman's legend permeates education and civic memory. He is celebrated in festivals, classroom tales, and public art as a symbol of pioneering spirit and harmony with nature. Chapman's life has been reinterpreted in light of environmental and spiritual values. Ecologists and nature writers often call him an early conservationist. They point out that he planted hundreds of thousands of trees and preached respect for all living things. For example, American Forests and National Geographic have dubbed him an icon of the conservation movement. Anecdotes of Appleseed, as cruelty-averse behaviors circulate widely. He once doused his campfire to avoid killing insects, and later lamented accidentally killing a rattlesnake. He reportedly bought mistreated farm animals and cared for them, actions praised by modern animal rights and environmental groups. While Chapman did clear wilderness for orchards, not conservation by today's standards, his reverence for nature, choosing to live simply, offering trees to settlers, and quoting scripture about creation, resonates with contemporary ecology. Religiously, Chapman was a devoted member of the Swedenborgian Church, New Church. Historians note he became a missionary for Emanuel Swedenborg's teachings as he traveled. This mystical Christian faith emphasized a spiritual kinship with nature, which influenced Chapman's vegetarianism and compassion toward animals. Today, some spiritual authors portray him as a kind of frontier Saint Francis, a pious drifter whose faith motivated his stewardship of the land. His Swedenborgian legacy also links him to American religious history. Contemporary scholars point out that one of the first published notices of Chapman was by a Manchester, England Swedenborgian society in 1817. Overall, Appleseed's modern influence bridges culture and environment. He is evoked in environmental education as a hero of reforestation, in religious circles as a parable of benign stewardship, and even among vegetarians as a pioneering exemplar. Whether viewed as a commercial nurseryman or a gentle saint, his story has become a canvas onto which Americans project values of wilderness appreciation, generosity, and simple living. In 1774, John Chapman is born in Leominster, Massachusetts, Sept. 26. In 1792, at age 18, Chapman heads west to Pennsylvania to work as a traveling nurseryman. In 1800, he plants his first apple orchards in western Pennsylvania, near Franklin, north of Pittsburgh. In 1802, Chapman sets out canoeing with apple seeds from Pittsburgh, extending his plantings westward. In 1806, he is already known as Johnny Appleseed by Ohio settlers. In 1817, an English Swedenborgian report mentions Chapman's missionary work in America, showing his growing reputation. In 1845, Chapman dies of pneumonia on March 18th at a friend's home near Fort Wayne, Indiana, after a storm-troubled journey to tend his orchard. In 1871, the Harper's Magazine publishes W. D. Haley's article celebrating Johnny Appleseed, launching the legend in print. 1881. Lydia Maria Child's poem Johnny Appleseed appears in the Atlantic Monthly, further popularizing his saintly image. In 1900, Ohio dedicates a Johnny Appleseed monument in Mansfield's Middle Park, calling him a pioneer apple nurseryman and civic benefactor. In 1948, Disney features Appleseed in the animated film Melody Time, introducing his story to post-war children, popular culture milestone. In 1966, the U.S. Postal Service issues a 5C Johnny Appleseed stamp, honoring his 192nd anniversary. In 1982, Pennsylvania dedicates a historical marker, noting Chapman's real contributions versus folklore. In 2004 to present, new analyses and media revisit Chapman IS life. Books like Johnny Appleseed and the American Orchard, 2012, and graphic novels 2019 reframe his story. Fort Wayne holds annual Johnny Appleseed festivals. Educators examine both fact and myth in classrooms. 2024. Scholarly articles, e.g. Ohio Magazine, Nouveau Dec 2024, and journalistic pieces continue to explore Chapman's complex legacy in U.S. history and folklore. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.